Hi there. It's with great honor that I introduce you to our distinguished keynote speaker tonight, Frank Wu. Frank is now a law professor at the University of Maryland and George Washington University. And before this, he served as Dean of Wayne State University Law School. When he was appointed in 2004, he became the only second Chinese American to be Dean of a U.S. law school. Frank is also an instructor and writer who's contributed to America's dialogue on race relations. He's been a prominent voice for affirmative action. Frank grew up in Detroit and chose a career in law after witnessing up close the injustices of the Vincent Chin trial. He'll be working on a book about the case, and it's a follow-up to his earlier book called Yellow, Race in America Beyond Black and White. Please help me welcome Frank Wu.
Good evening. I'd like to start by telling you a story. It's a true story, not only of me, but perhaps of some of you in this room as well. It's a story that I share with my friends who know that I'm invited from time to time to talk about issues of race, ethnicity, diversity, and the changing face of our nation. My friends who know that I spent about a decade working on a book on these subjects. I have friends who say to me, maybe they say this to you as well, they say, race, why are you obsessed with race? What's the big deal? They shrug and they say, you know, I really don't think about race all that much myself. To which I'm always tempted to reply, well, yes, exactly. That's part of the problem. But their inquiry is so sincere and so earnest, it deserves a better response than just that quip. For when they ask, well, just lighten up, get over it. What's the big deal after all? Aren't we colorblind now? I always share with them this story, that I'm not obsessed with race. We all are. We all are, perhaps even or especially when we don't realize that that's what's on our minds. It's not as if I wake up every morning and go off to work in Detroit or in Washington, D.C., where I now live, or in San Francisco, where I practiced law for a number of years in the 1990s. It's not as if I go off to work thinking to myself, here I go, an Asian American. I don't think about my ancestry every waking moment of every day any more than any of you do. When I go off to work, I think about the weather. I think about the errands that I have to run. I think about how to spend more time with my wife and our dogs. Not always in that order. As a law professor, I think about how to write a final exam that no student can possibly answer correctly. You know, so I just have the usual sorts of things on my mind like anyone else. And it's funny how often, it's not every day, but it is often enough, I'll be walking down the sidewalk, even someplace such as San Francisco, as diverse as it is with its long history of an Asian presence. I'll have an encounter with a kid, just a boy, 6, maybe 7 years old, who will remind me as we pass one another, strangers there who will never see each other again, that race is indelible, that it is what strikes people first and foremost, not last and least. It goes like this. I'll be walking down that sidewalk, minding my own business, and this kid will be coming the other way. And as he gets 25 feet away from me, 20 feet, as he approaches, he sees me there in the crowd, and he stops, and he smiles. And as soon as I notice he's looking at me, I can predict what will happen next. Maybe you can too. He's going to strike a pose. It's a karate, kung fu, martial arts pose, you know? Right there on the street, he wants to challenge me to a fight, you know? It's sort of ching-chong, something, howling and hissing, and then he sort of punches or kicks at the air. And then laughing, he turns around and runs away. Now, you know, I could chase this kid down the sidewalk and collar him and say, you're a bigot, but I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that because I know this is not an act of malice. There is no hatred in his heart. This is a joke, it's a prank, it's trivial. He'll have forgotten it by tomorrow. He doesn't realize how traumatic it was for me when I was his age, not all that long ago, growing up. And this would happen every day on the playground. Maybe some of you have had that experience too. Kids would call me chink or Jap or gook. They would say, "Are you a communist? Do you eat dogs? How can you see with eyes like that?" And so on and so forth as their parents complimented me, "My, you speak English so well." To which I would always say, "Gee, thanks, so do you." And so this child has no recollection of any of these moments. There's no question, though, that what he does is all about race. He knows nothing about me. He's never seen me before. And I notice as he scurries off, he doesn't challenge every adult to a kung fu match. It's only someone with this color of skin, this texture of hair, this shape of eyes, right? Even if I'm wearing a coat and tie, he's pretty sure I've got that black belt on underneath. And so it's in moments like this that I'm reminded of how important race is. I don't blame this kid because he's no different than any other kid. He's no different than you or me. He goes to the movies. He watches television. And if he sees someone who looks like me on the screen for more than 2 seconds, what is it I'm doing? Why, breaking cinder blocks with my head, right? It's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So when I go by and he says, "Yo, what's up, Jackie Chan?" Of course, it's as if he's prompted to do that. He's following a script, one that he's seen reenacted time and time again. For that is all stereotypes are. They're scripts that we follow that tell us how others will in turn behave toward us, or so we think. Sometimes I am tempted to catch up to this kid and say, I'm offended. Not as an Asian American, I'm offended as someone with a sense of humor. If you're gonna diss me, get some new material. I've seen this 100 times before. You're not even any good at it. And so though we can joke about this, we can shrug it off. This really is inconsequential. A moment like this, well, even though it brings up unpleasant memories, it's not going to keep me from applying for a job or buying a house or taking my wife out to a nice dinner. Yet it reminds me, and it makes me think, if in the innocence of childhood a kid will do this, what else is going on just beneath the surface there, from the callous disregard for individuals of limited English proficiency to the active bigotry that still goes on coast to coast? What are we able to glimpse from this moment of strangers passing on the street, but that race matters? It always has, and it continues to. That it doesn't matter how assimilated we are, what our personality is, what we may be thinking about, even if we wish to have nothing to do with racial matters, they still haunt us. It is just part of the legacy of the past. Some would suggest it's human nature. And so that is why I care about these issues and why I'm reminded from time to time, as I believe many of you in this room are, that we all should care. For from this child and his innocent actions on the sidewalk there is a direct line, a linkage to the material conditions of inequality that still affects so many of us, immigrant and native-born, Asian American, other people of color, the disadvantaged, whatever the cause. And that is why I do what I do. Stand up and speak out, because when that kid does that, I always wonder, what is there that we can do to reach out? Not to point fingers, but to ensure that that child grows up in an environment where he's able to befriend, to meet as an equal, as a peer, someone of Asian descent, and get to know them, to know that there's more to that person than the karate moves that he's seen on TV or on the movie screen.